You are Locked On Mets Postcast, part of Locked On Sports New York on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It wasn't John Maine, but it was pretty close as David Peterson gives the Mets 7 shutout innings as they defeat the Milwaukee Brewers 5-0 to make sure their magic number is 1 and to make sure that they go to Atlanta tomorrow for a very important doubleheader. Welcome into the Locked On Mets Postcast. I am your host, Chris Schubert, as the New York Mets finally find a way to defeat the Milwaukee Brewers 5-0. They find the urgency, the pitching delivers, and like I said, we are going to Atlanta tomorrow for what is ultimately going to be probably a doubleheader in which both games are going to be needed for those teams. But get the season started with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And the New York Mets hadn't had it all week. You'd have to go back to the Philly series last weekend for the urgency. They found it tonight. They didn't have it on Tuesday in Atlanta. They didn't have it on Friday or Saturday in Milwaukee, but they had it this afternoon from the word go, and you saw it in that first inning. It was only one run across the board, but it is the way that run was scored showed you that they understood the moment. Clearly, a message was sent by the players, by the coaching staff of what they needed to accomplish out there today because Francisco Lindor gets on base, then immediately steals second, and then Brandon Nimmo is able to drive him in to be able to get the Mets on the board 1-0. Then Brandon Nimmo steals a base. And again, the urgency for the New York Mets was on display. They were taking advantage of opportunities to extend on the base paths. The star players for this team stepped up in a big way. We are back to having performances of the game. It has been a little bit. I think we have to go back to last Sunday or last weekend before we had given out performances of the game. We didn't have them this week. There are performances of the game from this contest because Francisco Lindor stepped up. Brandon Nimmo had a big hit. Mark Vientos was 2 for 5. JD Martinez broke out. Again, for a couple of days there, we maybe thought that this team had lost their ability to get up off the mat when knocked down. They had done it so many times throughout the course of the season that it just became second nature for our response and our reaction when bad things happen to this team to be, they're going to get up from this. They're going to respond. They're going to find the counterpunch. And that was the message on Tuesday. And then we didn't get an opportunity to do it on Wednesday, didn't get an opportunity to do it on Thursday. So they go into Friday and there is no counterpunch. There is no response. Okay. This team has been knocked down. They'll get an opportunity to do it again on Saturday. Last night didn't go very well. So then I think obviously the magnitude of all of these games, obviously the importance of scoreboard watching and seeing what the Diamondbacks and Braves are up to and understanding that the magic number can dwindle and the Mets still controlled their own fate in this regard, that they didn't need to scoreboard watch. If they win a certain number of games over the course of the next couple of days, they're going to be in regardless of what the Braves and Diamondbacks do. You just wondered when they would be able to respond, when they would be able to get up off the mat. Because if they walked into tomorrow needing to win both of those games in order to get into the playoffs, the next 24 hours would have been very stressful. They are still going to be very stressful for all of us Mets fans as we watch this team try to win one of those two games tomorrow to push themselves to 89 wins on the season and to push themselves into the playoffs. But again, the urgency was there. They get the run early and they really didn't stop. 2 in the 4th, 1 in the 5th, 1 in the 6th. They get it up to 5-0. And this is where the Mets team thrives. They thrive in their ability to get good quality starting pitching and offense that's hitting in bunches, and they can turn it over to the bullpen to be able to get the 3 outs. Now, this feels like where we should do this part of the conversation because was texting with a buddy during the game. I have not seen the social media reaction to this. I'm sure there is going to be some level of reaction to the fact that in a 5-0 game, Carlos Mendoza did turn to Edwin Diaz. And in the interest of fairness, we talk about Carlos Mendoza in a positive light all the time. And so when there is a moment where there's an opportunity to be critical, or at least there's a conversation about being critical for Carlos Mendoza, we're going to bring it up here on these postcasts. And I will tell you, I don't necessarily have a problem with Carlos Mendoza deciding to use Edwin Diaz in tonight's contest because you'd have to go back, and I'm going to attempt to do this on the fly, but it had been a while since the last time that we saw him. The last time he pitched was a week ago. It was in that game on Sunday against the Phillies. Didn't get to pitch on Tuesday. They had an off day on Monday. Off days because of the weather Wednesday, Thursday. They didn't get him in the game on Friday, didn't get him in the game on Saturday. And with the importance of tomorrow's games. Now, yes, tonight's game was also important, but the Mets had a 5-0 cushion. And so maybe the game theory in front of you of knowing it's a 5-run lead allows you to act differently. But going into tomorrow, is that really the first time you want Edwin Diaz to pitch in 8 days in that type of pressure environment? We love Edwin Diaz. He's the strength of this team. He has found that elite closer stuff that we have seen from him in the past over the last month or so. I get it. I'm totally on board with Edwin Diaz basically being able to take the last 6 outs of the game and have it covered himself. But do you really want that moment, that atmosphere, needing to win one of those games to be the first time we see Edwin Diaz in 8 days? Because Edwin Diaz is going to be used a lot. He was going to be used tomorrow, at least in one game, if not two. He was going to be used in the wild card game if they get their wild card series on Tuesday. So he was going to work back-to-back days. And they've used him in back-to-back days in 3 days in a row recently. They have shown a want to be able to do that. They have shown an ability to want to get him in back-to-back games because, as Carlos Mendoza has called it, this is big boy time. And big boy time, we're going to lean on Edwin Diaz a little bit. So I don't necessarily have a problem wanting to get him into this game to let him shake off some rust. And you saw the rust tonight. He wasn't crisp. He wasn't super sharp. The fastball velocity was down a little bit. He was only in there at 97. So if that allows him to tomorrow feel good and be able to get it up to 98, 99, 100 when the Mets need 4 outs late in a game tomorrow, whether it's game 1 or game 2, or they need him to get a 6-out save in order to win the game, in order to clinch a playoff berth, I'm okay with Edwin Diaz using today as an opportunity to shake that rust off. It probably rules him out for both games tomorrow. And if you have a problem with that, I get it. But I don't know if the New York Mets would have used him in both games tomorrow and then had him go again on Tuesday. So Carlos Mendoza has to do a little bit of a dance here, and I did not have a problem with him being used tonight in this game, or this afternoon in this game. I get it. You feel a little weary about it, but Edwin Diaz is going to be available tomorrow, and the New York Mets are going to use him in some capacity. Let's hope that this offense that showed the urgency today gives Carlos Mendoza an opportunity to go to Edwin Diaz in the 7th inning or later of a really important game for this team. And you look at the urgency. That's the word that we used, and it was our message last night that they lacked the urgency. They didn't have the urgency last night. They didn't have I don't want to say awareness. I think they were very, very aware of the situation, but they didn't look like the team that had their season on the line. The Brewers did. We said that last night. Today, it was the opposite. The Brewers looked and acted like a team that had everything on cruise control, didn't use their A relievers, took Willy Adames out of the game when the game was a little bit out of hand, and they utilized the opportunity to shuffle some people around and not necessarily go full force in Sunday's game. And the Mets took advantage of that. But the urgency was there. Francisco Lindor played shortstop. They immediately put him to DH after game 1 into game 2, and then today back at shortstop. And you saw it on that first inning. He draws the walk. He steals second, scores on the hit by Nimmo, kind of needs some help getting up, walking a little gingerly. He is not 100%. But he understands his body. He understands his pain tolerance. And that is what this is about right now. He is managing the pain for the remainder of this season, however long it lasts, whether it's for just one more day or if it is into a postseason series. And you saw in the first inning just how much Francisco Lindor wants to be on the field for his teammates and for this franchise right now and trying to will them into the playoffs, because he is clearly not 100%. He is still really good. He was 2 for 4 in today's game, hit a home run, drew that walk in the first inning, had 2 RBIs. He was good today. He was MVP Lindor, but you can clearly see he is not 100%, and just a gamer effort from Francisco Lindor after those first 2 games back on Friday and Saturday were not his best. I was a little worried about whether or not he could provide something for this team. And today, when they had to have it, this team had to have a win today. They could have very easily, and they might as well win both games tomorrow, but putting that type of pressure on yourself after then you lose to Atlanta on Tuesday and then you get swept by the Brewers, you're on a 4-game losing streak. Now you have to win both tomorrow. I think would have been just a real uphill climb for this team. So they had to have this one today, and Francisco Lindor and all of the guys on that team understood the moment, and they came through in a big way. We have made it 10 plus minutes without discussing probably the most important thing from today's game for the New York Mets, other than the fact that they were 5-0 winners over the Milwaukee Brewers. And that would be the performance of David Peterson and how he had a little bit of a throwback to John Maine. We will get into that here on the other side. Hey, NFL fans, you can get started with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. I mean, what could you say about the job that David Peterson did today? There are no words for what David Peterson did today. He was the David Peterson that has helped this team get into this position. He was elite today. 7 innings, the 1 hit, 3 walks, 8 strikeouts, 95 pitches, delivered in a way not only because he kept the Brewers off the board and put a bunch of zeros up to allow the Mets to get to a comfortable 5-0 lead and be able to have this game on pretty much cruise control after they broke it open there in the 4th to make it 3-0 and then just tacked on some additional insurance runs in the 5th and the 6th. But you had David Peterson also save the bullpen. Going 95 pitches, only throwing the 7 innings, meaning that Carlos Mendoza only had to use 2 relievers. Had a feeling you wanted to get Edwin Diaz in there because he did. And then Phil Maton, who's been great for this team this season. And you're able to keep some other guys fresh. Get them a day off because you're going to potentially need guys to go in both games tomorrow because the season's on the line. And so there is no managing workloads. There is no, I'm going to save this guy because I'm going to need him in a week. No, you have to get through tomorrow with 1 victory in those 2 games. And so David Peterson going 7 innings tonight, a la John Maine in 2007. And everyone is old enough to remember that John Maine start, where he went out there and dominated for 7+, had the 14 strikeouts, and the Mets needing a victory to stay alive in the playoff race. John Maine delivered the type of performance similarly to what we saw from David Peterson tonight. I'll take that John Maine performance just by a little bit. But because of the magnitude of the moment, that's what this reminded me of. That David Peterson gave the Mets a John Maine type performance when they needed it most, when they needed it to keep their season alive, when they needed it to force the issue for tomorrow where they only needed 1 game in order for them to clinch a playoff berth. And I'm only saying that because the Diamondbacks are up probably 100 runs at this point over the San Diego Padres. The game's actually over. They won 11-2. So it is official. The Mets magic number is 1 after their win today, and they need 1 tomorrow against the Braves in either the first or second game. They're going to play both of them. We thought there was this weird scenario that could play out where only one of them was needed or potentially none of them were needed. We're getting to a place where both of those games, just like they would have been on Wednesday and Thursday, are going to be needed for both of these teams in order to get into the postseason. And so David Peterson, when the team needed him the most, delivered in a big way. After Sean Manaea struggled, after Luis Severino struggled, after Jose Quintana struggled, although I think gave the Mets a good enough effort last night in order for them to be able to win the game, but was not what he had been the last 5 starts. And for David Peterson, I think the thing that I would add on top of that performance is his last 3 times out haven't been, or 2 of the last 3 times David Peterson has been out have not been elite David Peterson, or at least what we've seen from him here in 2024. That game against the Phillies where they lose 12-2 on Friday, 3 2/3, the 8 hits, the 5 runs. He then has a decent start the weekend prior against the Phillies, 7 2/3, 4 hits, 1 run. But then against Toronto, 4 1/3, 8 hits, 5 runs. It kind of felt like what we had seen from him through May up until that start in Toronto, really. He had been exceptional. He had been arguably the second best pitcher on this team behind Sean Manaea. He had been just part of a 1-2 punch of dueling lefties with him and Sean Manaea to lead this rotation. And then he hits that roadblock in Toronto, responds in a big way against Philly, but then struggles in his bounce back performance against Philly in his second time seeing them. And you just worried, which David Peterson were you going to get? Are you going to get the David Peterson that we've seen more often than not here in 2024? Or was he going to regress to the guy we've seen for 2 starts this year and for what we've seen for the majority of his career? And he left no doubt. He left no doubt of what version we were going to see from him today. And to get 7 scoreless innings in a must win, again, it wouldn't have eliminated them, but asking yourself to win 2 games of a doubleheader is almost an impossible task. So this was a must win for the New York Mets to not walk into Atlanta with a 4-game losing streak and needing to win both games in a place that has been a house of horrors for them. David Peterson shoved. You see it there on the graphic. He shoved tonight or this afternoon in a way that this team has not gotten from their pitching, at least this week. And he gave them the performance that they needed in order to get it done. And then the bullpen does what the bullpen has been doing all season. Phil Maton, who has just been great, one of the best additions that David Stearns has made all year. And then As we mentioned at the top, Carlos Mendoza used this as an opportunity to get Edwin Diaz in there. I could understand if you're a little bit upset by it, but I understand it from the perspective of I don't need Edwin Diaz to go 8 days without pitching, and the first opportunity that he gets to quote-unquote shake that rust off is game 1, when we're going to ask him to potentially get anywhere from 6 outs to 3 outs or 2 outs to be able to win a game and go into the postseason. I don't want that to be where he's shaking off 8 days worth of rust. I would instead rather get him out there, even though it is a blowout, even though they're up 5-0 and it's not a safe situation, shake off that rust and be ready for tomorrow. So, and you tip your cap to David Peterson because of the job that he was able to do. We have performances of the game and final thoughts from what has been a very good day for the New York Mets as they drop their magic number to 1. We will give out those performances and wrap up this Locked On Mets postcast here on the other side. Gametime, you're going to want to download the Gametime app today because they've got a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And not just the Gametime Picks, they've also got all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So you open up the Gametime app, you toggle on that all-in pricing feature, you are going to be able to see the total up front and not get any surprise fees at checkout. How about a seat view? While you're checking out those fees, while you're checking out that total upfront, you'll be able to see a picture of a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy it. The lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. And Gametime ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. What time is it? Game time. Make sure you are subscribed here to the Locked On Sports New York YouTube channel, where we're going to have postcasts for all of the New York teams. I just got done a little bit ago. If you're just joining us here on the Mets side of things, I did a Jets one earlier today. So a lot of postcasts here on the Locked On Sports New York YouTube channel. Jay Berman's got you covered on the Giants side of things for football. The Knicks are right around the corner as well. So we have you covered here on the Locked On Sports New York YouTube channel. So go ahead, subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you know when we go live, and you can join us here for these postcasts immediately after your favorite New York sports teams are in action. Performances of the game, we just went chapter and verse. The praise that David Peterson deserves for his start today. We will start this performances of the game by continuing that. Again, we were giving out the stars like they do in hockey. This is the top effort, what David Peterson was able to do today, because I'm sure that you were watching this game. You woke up this morning knowing that David Peterson was starting, and you were a little worried that you were going to get the bad David Peterson, the David Peterson where he's off by just a little bit. And because he doesn't have that elite velocity, being off by just a little bit can lead to some walks, or it could lead to some bad command that leads to some easily hard hit balls that lead to some runs, and that lead to a stat line like you saw against the Philadelphia Phillies the other day for David Peterson. Well, David Peterson showed up in a big way, and the New York Mets got to have their starting rotation celebration with their new OMG sign that they haven't been able to have for the last couple of days because of the struggles from their rotation. They got to have that big celebratory moment, and you saw all the smiles on their faces for that. Again, what more can you say about Francisco Lindor and the gamer that he is? We'll give him another performance of the game. 2 for 4, as we mentioned, the home run, 2 RBIs of the walk, stole the base in this game. And again, I think obviously not going to win the MVP because he got hurt and missed all that time, and Ohtani's been doing Ohtani things. But I think today was Exhibit A that I would use for an MVP type campaign for Francisco Lindor. Clearly not 100%, clearly battling it, but he set the tone from the word go. Draws the walk, immediately steals a base. And I think that was clearly something that they talked about pregame. It was clearly a message from Carlos Mendoza. Again, I'm not in that room. I'm just kind of guessing, but I feel pretty strongly about the fact that players, Mendoza, coaches, they all stood up there and said, this is it. We got to go get this one today. Let's have some urgency. Let's go out there. Let's steal some bases. Coming into this game today, the Brewers had stolen I think 17 bases in the 5 games that the two teams had played up until this point. And the Mets didn't even have an attempt. They hadn't even attempted a stolen base against the Brewers this season. Remember, these two teams opened up the year against each other, and the Brewers swept that series, part of the Mets' 0-5 start to the year. And so the Mets were looking for their first victory of the year against the Milwaukee Brewers, and it came at a pretty good time, getting it today in order to reduce their magic number to 1. But this is a team that had not attempted stolen bases all year against the Milwaukee Brewers. And so Francisco Lindor was able to go up there and, even though he's playing shortstop, be able to just showcase everything that he has left in the tank despite the back injury by drawing the walk, stealing the base, scoring on Nimmo's single, and hustling, sliding. Needed a little help getting up, and that was maybe a little bit of a concern, but clearly he is going to push through whatever he is dealing with. And he said it's just pain tolerance, right? It's not, he can't do anything worse to it. There's no structural damage. He's just dealing with a sore back, and it just is going to come and go until he's able to really get some serious rest on it in the offseason. So you tip your cap to Francisco Lindor for the performance that he had. And listen, we're going to give the third spot. We're going to give two people the third spot because Jose Iglesias goes 2 for 5 and extends his hitting streak, I believe, now up to 20 games on the year. He has just been awesome for this team. Consistency. We've talked about it. I talk about it on the Jets postcast. We've talked about it here on the Mets postcast. This offense hasn't had consistency a lot of the time during the year. Guess what? Jose Iglesias is that consistency. A 20-game hitting streak seems to always come through for this team when they need to. Plays great defense, moves all over the place, plays short when Francisco Lindor was out. Is now in there at second base and is able to just hold it down there, really shoring up the infield defense, the energy that he provides, the spark that he provides. And again, went 2 for 5 today and extended his hitting streak to, I believe, now 20 games going into tomorrow's doubleheader with the Atlanta Braves. And JD Martinez, the second longest over streak in Mets history. They were talking about it on the SNY broadcast that he was unfortunately chasing down Ray Ordonez's 0 for 37 streak. But JD Martinez comes through 2 for 5 in this game, scores a run, and that has to feel like a huge sigh of relief for JD Martinez and this entire team. Carlos Mendoza talked about it before the game of why JD Martinez drew into the lineup. And if you joined us on the Locked On Mets postcast last night, we discussed the lineup construction for this team of, with Lindor being the DH, kind of limited what Carlos Mendoza was able to do with the rest of the lineup. And JD Martinez is really the only other true DH option that you have. And he's been struggling. And before the game, Carlos Mendoza talked about how we brought JD Martinez into the New York Mets for games like this, for moments like this. We have the confidence that he's going to be able to get through this and that he's going to be able to come through for us in a big way with timely hits. And guess what? JD Martinez did his manager a solid because that's a gutsy call, because it is very easy to sit JD Martinez with the struggles that he's having, the urgency that this game requires. We got to score runs. We can't have another over. We talked about the star players for this team last night going to combine over 15. They had to get after it in a big way. But Carlos Mendoza, having a great feel for his clubhouse, having a great feel for his room, was able to go out there and put JD Martinez in the lineup, and he goes 2 for 5 and rewards his manager. And imagine the confidence that could give JD Martinez, because I'm here to tell you, he's going to be in the lineup tomorrow. They brought him in for moments like this. He is going to be in there tomorrow for the New York Mets in that lineup. And so to get him going, we also want to give him some kudos here as well for our performances of the game. So David Peterson, putting together an absolutely elite performance when the Mets were in dire need of that type of performance from their starting pitching staff, and specifically from David Peterson. Francisco Lindor for his excellent job tonight, 2 for 4, stealing a base, setting the tone early, and I think providing the energy and spark that this team needed. And then JD Martinez and Jose Iglesias just continuing to be Jose Iglesias, and JD Martinez breaking out of that long streak. It is now off to Atlanta for a doubleheader tomorrow. They're going to play both of these games. There is not a world where only one of these games matters. With the Diamondbacks winning today, I believe the Braves were losing as we were doing this show. I don't know if the game is over. I'm going to check real quick before we get out of here. Yep, the Royals did beat the Braves. So the Diamondbacks are at 89 wins. The Mets and Braves are now tied again at 88 wins. So both teams need a victory tomorrow. So the fun thing that we're all going to get to see tomorrow when we wake up, or maybe it'll get announced, but maybe there'll be some gamesmanship, is what these starting pitching matchups are going to be, because both teams can get out of here with a victory, and both teams would then go to the postseason. So we will see how both managers choose to play it. We will see how they deploy their pitching staffs, but it is setting up for a very, very cool end of the season. Now, all the other teams are done. So there is one day left before the postseason, and the New York Mets and Atlanta Braves are going to have a pre-postseason series where they are going to play 2 games where if they split, both teams are in. But the New York Mets, their magic number is down to 1. They need to find 1 win tomorrow against the Atlanta Braves, and they will be dancing in the postseason on Tuesday. That's going to do it for us here on this edition of the Locked On Mets postcast. Please subscribe, like the video, comment, turn on that notification bell so that you know when we go live. No, I see you guys in the chat. Don't worry, chat. I see you. I'm reading those comments throughout the game. There's some people in the chat chatting here as we are signing off, saying I'm not reading the chat. I'm paying attention to the chat here. We got a lot of stuff to get off of the menu here before we get out of here. So the New York Mets in action tomorrow, doubleheader, needing one to punch their ticket into the playoffs. Again, subscribe here to us on the Locked On Sports New York YouTube channel. We've got you covered after each and every of your New York teams play. And if you're joining us in the podcast feed, we do appreciate that. We also would love for you to join us on the live side of things when these games are over. But that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Mets podcast. Hopefully everybody's able to get some good sleep and enjoy what is going to be a very drama-filled day tomorrow for the New York Mets, needing one win to punch their tickets to the playoffs. See you, everybody.